It's a real pleasure to be back in La Ciudad de la Furia. Some of you will get that. And it's a real pleasure to share this panel with my good friends Ron Manners, Ken Schoolland, and Chris Lingle. When Jacek asked me to moderate this panel about whether Argentina is a role model, my answer was immediately, yes, of course. I mean, it is a role model. Are you kidding me? I am from Bolivia myself. I am a professor at Mercer University. I live in the States. But for the last 3 months or so, I have been highly involved in politics in Bolivia. And I can tell you without hesitation, Argentina has become the role model for the region. And probably the fact that is most well known among economists, among social scientists, is the fact that Argentina was able to reduce inflation almost immediately. And that's massive, okay? When President Milei got to power in December 2023, the inflation rate was at about 211%. It went up to 292% by April 2024. But then after that, it just came down and down and down. It's projected to end at 27% this year, from 292%. So most people know this fact, and it's, of course, impressive. To me, however, the most impressive fact is that Argentina was able to close their chronic fiscal deficit also almost immediately. And they didn't do it, as our speaker yesterday said, by raising taxes. They did it by cutting government spending. 30% of government spending. That has never been done in history. So, Jacek, are you kidding me? Of course Argentina is a role model. They cut 15% of the public employees, which is something that we desperately need to do in Bolivia and in other parts of the world. When you fix inflation and when you cut government spending, the natural reaction is economic growth. And during 2024, Argentina was able to grow at 5%, which is a very decent rate given the terrible state of the economy that President Milei inherited. I ran for vice president of Bolivia for the last elections. The election is tomorrow. And you see me here, which is weird. If you're running for vice president, why in the world are you here? And I am here because I quit the race about 3 weeks ago, which worked out really well because I can be here in Buenos Aires with my good friends. But I quit the race because the political party that invited me to run as vice president was supposed to be a right-wing party, a libertarian party, was supposed to be a free market party. But when I started campaigning, which I did for about a month, and talking with the press and rallies and so on, and I started saying, we need to cut government spending like President Milei did. We need to start getting rid of our massive bureaucracy. We need to privatize health. We need to privatize education because the public sector can never do it well. Then the campaign director, the political party, called me and said, listen, don't say those things. Don't say those things because we're going for the median voter. And we're never going to get them if you say privatize this, privatize that. And to me, the most important example of Argentina is that Milei did exactly that, and the popular support went up. So there is the lesson to my former friends at that political party that didn't want me to say that. Naturally, I quit the race, and I'm able to be here. And I'm going to end with this saying, Argentina is definitely a role model because of its accomplishments economically, but probably more importantly because of the moral fight that President Milei gives every single day. He calls it la batalla cultural. And I think this is tremendously important. I've seen some of this in Guatemala with University Francisco Marroquin. Chris teaches there. And I've seen this in other countries, but we desperately need la batalla cultural in Bolivia, in Venezuela, and the rest of the world. So yes, to me the answer is Argentina is a huge, massive role model. And now I want to know what my good friends think. I'm going to start with Ron. What do you think about that? You have one.
I think this works. I'm not sure what the debate is about. It's unanimous so far. But Antonio has explained why I am here to steal your ideas and export them back to Australia. There are so many similarities between Australia and Argentina. It's just amazing. And so many differences. I understand in 1901 we were both, Australia and Argentina, with the two wealthiest countries in the world. Wow, haven't we both had a rocky road since then? But I think there's another similarity today in that Argentina and Australia probably rank as the two best countries in the world to live. Very few people would argue with that. But living is only 1/3 of it. When it comes to which is the best country in the world in which to work, or the best country in which to invest, it's different matters altogether, and it's governed by usually very temporary economic circumstances. And you got a remarkable president who's been courageous enough to bring in these reforms. And I hope during the question time someone will ask, how can you make these reforms permanent? Because we tried economic reforms in New Zealand some years ago. We then followed that up with very successful economic reforms in Australia, but they didn't last. For every one person bringing in these economic reforms, there is immediately 10 people working against that person, trying to pull them down because it's upset the status quo, the people that are living off the government. We have presently in Australia more people living off the government than working and supporting the nation. And our Mankell Foundation really is concentrating on generating young people who are productive and entrepreneurial enough to become part of the productive class to counterbalance this other dreadful situation we've got. The other amazing similarities is the level of inventiveness. In Argentina, you've had 3 remarkable inventions that you know all about, the ballpoint pen and the cardiac ablation unit, and the fingerprint identification system. You know all about that. But did you know Australia also has had a remarkable track record? And I just mentioned 3 Wi-Fi came out of Australia. The black box flight recorder and the heart pacemaker came out of Australia. But remarkably, most of these inventions were produced by people that didn't live in those 2 countries. The secret was that both Australia and Argentina attracted the very best brains from around the world. They were fleeing from oppressive governments in their home countries, and we both benefited by being attractive enough to attract the very people we needed. And that was the secret to it. But when we come to today, where are we right now? So I'm an optimist for Argentina because you've got a president who is skilled in Austrian economics and free market economics. How remarkable. So I'm encouraged. But in Australia, we're under the spell of a Trotskyite Prime Minister, so I'm not quite sure of where we're going, but I'm here. And I must say that I'm here on a special mission, and I think because I'm among friends, I can confide in the purpose of my being here, and it is to point this way with a bit of luck.
Maybe you guys can move the.
Oh,
there you go.
I'm here to kidnap your president and take him back with me. And to make it easy for me to get him through the customs, I already have a passport. And it's an Australian passport for him. So it may be our gain and your loss. If that's my plan A, if my plan A is successful, this situation will be in Australia's favour. But if it's not, we can look at plan B, and that's the other things we can talk about. We know that this should go on to the proof that was mentioned, your remarkable success in conquering inflation. Fantastic. That's the proof. And the next one, something about to happen, we'll skip that one. By the way, I'm putting all this stuff in a paper because I knew that your translation machines would not handle an Australian to Spanish translation. Can we move to the next one? Now, what have we got here? This one. I want to dwell on this one. In Australia, our government is wondering why we are slipping so badly in competitiveness. The Fraser Institute just released the figures on the attractiveness of Australia. We've slipped from 4th position to 17th position in 1 year. So our Australian government is holding a summit to which they're attracting all the leaders in Canberra, and I think it starts tomorrow, to solve the problem of what are we doing wrong in Australia. Well, there should be no mystery. If we look at this publicly available chart from The Economist magazine, you find the degree of government bloat, the number of bureaucrats per head of population. Australia is by far the leader of the world. We've got 150 bureaucrats per 1,000 people. If you look where Argentina is on this chart, you're 9th. Australia has 3 times the population of bureaucrats as Argentina. And if you guys think you've got a problem, have a look at that. Now, somebody, I think, in the government has said, we should look at Argentina and see what they're doing right. So they've done a research study and they've come up with the fact, I think their information is old, because they've come up with the fact that some guy called Perón is running the place and they're bringing in his policies to entrench the corporate capitalism where the whole of the corporate world lives off the government funding. I mean, it's a track. It's just, the information is correct, but it's out of date. So there it is. So there we are. So you know where we're going. Watch out for the paper when it's published, and I'll send it across to the organisers in about by next Thursday. That's a promise. So I will conclude by simply saying that the main thing we've got in it. Oh, I haven't had a chance to look at the Argentinian constitution, but I know in Australia the constitution is interpreted by the politicians as a document to protect them from the people. And I know that we, the people in Australia, regard the Constitution as to being there to protect us from them. Anyway, read the Constitution and use it as often as you can to protect yourself if there's any deviation from this wonderful trajectory that has been set by your fantastic president. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ron.
Can you put it up? Yeah. I've drawn as my role model for many years the idea of New Zealand. You know, from 1984, they had the most radical free market economic reforms of the industrial world. in the post-war era. And I always was telling my students about the great reforms of Sir Roger Douglas. He was following the ideas of Friedrich Hayek, which was an irony because the Labour Party came to power in 1984, the Socialists of New Zealand, replacing the National Party, the Conservatives, and implementing these radical free market economic reforms. For one thing, ending the most heavily subsidized farm sector in the world, gone in 3 months. Cutting spending in half. They cut 3/4 of the post offices, closed them in a single day. Privatized various things, rails, ports. All of these industries that were owned and operated by the government were privatized by the Labour Party. They incentivized profits. The agencies that still ran services still had to turn a profit. The weather department had to earn more money than they spent in their weather reports. They cut their taxes, income taxes, in half. They cut the regulations. They said, well, we don't have to renew driver's licenses every couple of years. People don't forget how to drive. They opened up trade, radically ended their tariffs and trade barriers, and they ended currency controls. Now, all of these gave Sir Roger Douglas lessons that are posted in his book, Unfinished Business, that he says are the lessons that he would advise other countries to follow. So I was taking a look at those lessons and seeing how closely they were followed by other countries. Now, since New Zealand, now I'd have to say that Milei has given me a brand new model of economic reform, radical economic reform, even more radical. And I really love it, and it'll be the new path to follow. But I'd like to see how he followed those lessons that Sir Roger Douglas advised. One, implement reform in quantum leaps. Yes, he has definitely attempted to do that. Obstructed by the Congress, because he still doesn't control Congress. Hopefully, with the next election, he will. But he's made great strides with presidential decrees. Speed is essential, and he's been very, very speedy with this sort of thing as well. And I'd say that these two methods, quantum leaps and speed is essential, are advised by Sir Roger Douglas so that you can overcome all the resistance that will stand in your way of making the economic reforms. And by the way, New Zealand was so successful that they were re-elected. The Labour Party was re-elected in 1988 with an overwhelming mandate. And they were extremely successful and were placed for about 3 decades at the top of the Economic Freedom of the World Index as a result of the reforms. So it was a lot. For quality policies, you need quality people. I think Milei has been excellent at appointing people who understand his philosophy. And that comes down to this next thing here. Key to credibility is consistency. He is consistent in his policy, and he's let the dog see the rabbit, meaning let the population see where you're going and don't sell the public short. In other words, don't treat them like idiots. They're smart enough to understand where you're going if you explain it to them. Unlike, I would say, Trump has done. He's treated the populace as his minions, and he doesn't trust them. But Milei does feel that they can trust him. He has spent his whole career explaining his philosophy, and that's remarkable because now there's no shortage of people to understand where he's going and why. Don't blink. Public confidence rests on your composure. In other words, keep on a steady path. Don't fall off it. And I think that he's been very, very good at that. And unlike Trump, who vacillates back and forth, and of course he's not free market at all, not principled at all. His tariffs and other kinds of actions show that he's really, in my mind, a populist. And then get the fundamentals right. I think no one has been more successful at that than Javier Milei. So I'd say he's my superhero for the model of economic reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, I'll take that. Thank you. I don't sit. So I hope it'll keep you awake because it keeps me awake. So I'm, again, a bit like Ron, I'm going to focus on another country and compare it to what's happening here. And because of my affiliation with Francisco Marroquin in Guatemala, with many of my colleagues here that gauchos that have been there and still remain a part of it, including Alberto Venegas Lynch Jr. And what I'm looking at is a thread that began in Guatemala 55 years ago with this man, a very dear friend of mine, Don Musso. He brought many of the great thinkers, the professors from this country to help support him in his endeavor to make Guatemala the kind of country that Milei is trying to do now for your country. Alas, Musso's endeavors were not as successul, but it's continued through many generations now of young people. And again, I'm a microeconomist, and so I make judgments on a micro level. Even if we did not change Guatemala, we changed some individuals, and that's a win. And so I got ahead on that. So I would argue that Musso and Milei are rather linked in that regard. Alberto Venegas Lynch Jr. came in the early 1970s, at the beginning of Marroquin. They partnered together with Musso, and then some of the people in this room, in one manner or another, were in Guatemala either at a Liberty Fund colloquium or colleagues at the university. So, and I probably left some names off, but these are the ones that came to mind. And again, Juan Carlos Kachanowski was the closest to me. And but Martin is not here. He was here earlier. So, but many of these, and if I left your name out, I apologize. I just did this quickly. Ricardo Rojas is there now. He's a great scholar, a legal scholar, who's helping with Milei's government, even though he's now living in Guatemala. As you know, as people that live here are painfully aware, that Peronism was a cancer that was introduced to your body politic based upon a sort of a populist, nationalist, judicialist kind of concept. It was anti-imperialist, which is not a bad thing. But, remarkably, as you probably, certainly all the gauchos know, that Perón came back for a second term many years later. Now, what he was relying upon was not an ideology, but a populism. And this kind of, the absence of populism is what presumably allowed Peronism and the Peronist Party and those that are associated with it to survive for this long period of time. They made references to social justice, other kinds of nonsense arguments like social justice, as I mentioned yesterday, and workers' rights. This was something that, again, was a way of creating an electoral coalition. So the unions, the working class, the middle class were sort of activated to support Perón and his successors. Now, of course, what happened is that we saw in Argentina a collapse. But in the post-war period, Perón was inspired by the fascists, Mussolini in particular, and again, this is pretty much a fascist agenda that was sort of laundered and cleaned up over the years and then glamorized by Evita, being a Broadway rock star. But economic collapse. We had persistent inflation, lots of long-run deficits and so on. So now we're where we are today. Now, before Milei, there was triple-digit inflation, at least, well, these numbers fungible. I mean, it depends when you, I think I got these in June or July, whatever. Persistent deficits, very large for this size economy, 100 billion or so. Widespread poverty was 40 to 45%, and a very active black market exchange. By the way, I like that better than I do now. Argentina, for me, is about the same as, the cost of going out is about what it is in Europe or the U.S. Before, it was a bargain. But it's good news for you. I'm happy to take the punishment. I hope that this is part of the stabilization process. So, as Ken mentioned, these are radical changes. And Milei I trust Milei in the way that I don't trust Donald Trump. Milei has what I would call the right instincts. He knows what the right way is. Will he go there directly? Politics is the art of possible. He's constrained by the political realities. He has a minority, effectively a minority government without the substantial support in Congress. And we're hoping that maybe in the upcoming elections that will change. He's opposed to the central bank. I mean, he didn't close it. Well, okay, surprise. It's not politically possible at the moment, perhaps. He didn't dollarize. So what? His instincts are to move the country in that direction. Now, if he were a dictator, he could have done all these things. So it's good in a way that he didn't do these things. And the only way he could have gotten away with it is to be a dictator, I would argue. So I'm somewhat apologetic for his failures, and I'm willing to endure those failures. I'm happy to criticize him, but I'm happy also to endure those failures until the timing is better for him. So he wants to allow markets to operate, eliminating subsidies. He hasn't gotten rid of the export subsidies. I'm right, Wheelie? You still have export subsidies, right? Export tariffs.
Just.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's reduced the import, but they still have the most irrational tariff is an export tariff, and it's still there. Yeah. I'm okay with that, Well, I would rather it not be there, but he's done other things. He's moving in the right direction.
Chris, can we do 1 minute?
Okay, I'm in.
Yep.
So what's he done? Cut fuera. Lots of things have been reduced. Inflation is down to a monthly rate of less than 2%, fiscal surplus, and a modest economic expansion. That's his hope for, and what he did was give to the young people a hope for their future. This is why he was successful. And it may be why, in other countries, most families receive a net payment from the state. And so he's promising to cut that. And that people would vote in face of that is really reassuring. So I think what's happened, it's up to the voter in Argentina that has made the right decisions to pick the right man. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. We may have just a couple of minutes for questions, if you have any. Back there.
Thank you. So, I guess one of the things about being a role model is, Argentina also had some very specific conditions. Poverty was quite dire, as has been mentioned, for Milei to rise up. Is this sort of, do things have to get that bad as a necessary condition for someone like Milei to be able to come up and sort of, clean house? Do the distinguished panelists think that this model could be applied to countries which perhaps are in a downward trajectory, like the United States, but maybe aren't as severely desperate for new leadership as Argentina was?
I think that's a great question. I think you need a critical mass. I've seen that in Bolivia. The country is not ready yet because things hasn't been that bad. So there is some truth about that. But then again, you look at Venezuela, and Venezuela should have reached that critical mass long ago, or Cuba, and nothing happens, right? So I'm not sure. I guess it depends on each country.
I would say that crisis equals opportunity for good things and for bad things. But it does have to be really bad. People have to suffer a really big crisis that they're really fed up about before they'll make the change. But whether it makes it good or bad, that's still dependent on what we do as to planting the seeds of the future ideas.
I think it's our responsibility to remind all our governments that the two most portable things in the world are people and capital. People can move just with an airline ticket, and capital can move by pressing a button on a computer. And if they're reminded, they will lose the very best of their people unless they lift their game. They will continue to lose people. I know that I'm involved in mining, and I get on a plane anywhere in the world, I will meet Australian geologists, because our title permitting system in Australia is just about impossible. So they are all around the world generating wealth for so many countries because they're not welcome at home. Our government has got to be reminded that they've lost their seed corn. They've lost the next generation of wealth. But this is not what motivates a Trotsky government. This should be no surprise. Not on their list of priorities is to have their citizens independent and prosperous. We think that's a priority to us, but it's certainly not to a government like we have in Australia at the moment.
Back there, yes. One more.
Raphael, my name. I think this topic didn't come up in this conference, and I am wondering why in a libertarian conference. But Chris, you were mentioning the economy should be dollarized, the Argentine economy should be dollarized. Why not make a leap and Bitcoinize it? What is, what is your opinion about that? Is there any talk about that? Does it make sense? And what's the
I would do whatever
attitude of
one needs to do to take away the power of the central bank to destroy wealth. Dollarization is a possibility, and it's probably a more practical one. Again, I just don't think the timing is right. They don't have sufficient reserves until you get the Argentine citizens to believe that the government will protect property rights. It's going to stay in Uruguay, it's going to stay in Miami, it's going to stay in Panama. So this is one of the problems. I mean, this would be a way to approach that. Make property rights secure and give some assurance of that, but it's not there yet.
I'd like to de-dollarize the U.S. government. As Hayek recommends, let's allow choice in currency, end the legal tender laws.
No, I just disagree a little bit. I don't think you need international reserves. I mean, people think, oh, Argentina needs dollars to dollarize. That's not the case. And the example of Ecuador is a good one to look at. But you just need to open the market for whatever currency people want to hold and just get rid of your own politicians controlling that. We're good?